morning from CBS News. This is Up to the Minute. I'm Ed Crane.
And I'm Nanette Hansen. Thanks for being with us. Here's what's happening on this Wednesday morning. In Japan this morning, more commuters were rushed from the subway to the hospital. More than 24 people were treated after complaining of stinging eyes and a bad odor in a subway of Yokohama. That's a suburb of Tokyo. Japan has been jittery since a poison gas attack on Tokyo's subways last month, which killed 12 people and left more than 5,000 ill. Japan's central bank, meanwhile, is scooping up the dollar, but the intervention hasn't stopped the greenback from dipping under 80 yen. That mark has never been breached since the modern exchange rate system was set up in the late 1940s. The dollar clawed its way back, though, and Steve Herman has the latest from Tokyo.
The U.S. dollar hit a new modern low against the yen shortly after most traders arrived here for work. Tokyo traders dumped dollars, driving the American currency all the way down to 79 3/4 yen. That was significantly below the record low it had set on April 10th of 80.15 yen. Analysts say the new lows were not unexpected, and many are predicting that the greenback will continue to plunge. Many export-oriented Japanese companies are preparing for things to get even worse. Accountants are now talking of recalculating company forecasts to cope with a dollar that could plunge into the 60 yen range within a year and 50 yen territory after that. Steve Herman for CBS News, Tokyo.
The United States has accused Iraq of breaking a promise to allow weekly visits to two Americans held in a Baghdad prison. The State Department says a Polish diplomat showed up for a scheduled visit yesterday and was turned away for no reason. The two men have been sentenced to 8 years in prison for crossing into Iraq from Kuwait. Air Force investigators got their first daylight look at a deadly crash site yesterday. The C-21 Learjet went down in a residential section of Alabama late Monday, claiming the lives of all 8 people on board. Clark Feister, one of 4 Assistant Air Force secretaries, was in the group traveling from Maryland to Texas. Phil Robertson has more.
The scene was somber as Air Force personnel began withdrawing the bodies. The cause of the crash still unknown, but at least a few rumors have been confirmed. According to investigators, the pilot was diverting his flight to Maxwell Air Force Base when something went wrong. He pleaded for an emergency landing, but before he and his 8 passengers could reach safety, the C-21 crashed into these woods.
Approach through the wooded area at the top of the hill, coming in this direction, striking some very large trees up there, and impacting the ground just over there.
Witnesses of the crash site say it was not what they expected at all. Obviously, the jet hit with such great force that survival was impossible.
I could not tell by looking at it that that was a wing. I could tell that the silver part, the tail section, probably, once you looked at it and they told me it was a tail section, I could tell it was. But it's very hard, and I didn't see the landing gear until he pointed it out.
So the Air Force continues to flag the site, measure the impact, and look for answers. A lot of questions will definitely need to be answered, but it's still staggering how a pilot with a wounded aircraft could set his craft down in these woods only 100 yards from the nearest house. In Alexander City, I'm Phil Robertson for CBS News.
The potential rigors of a presidential campaign have forced one potential candidate to drop plans at a 1996 run. Pennsylvania Governor Robert Casey says he's not sure he's up to the physical demands of a national campaign. He had already set up an exploratory committee, begun fundraising, and recruited campaign workers for a challenge to President Clinton in the primaries. Casey's physical strength remains in doubt. He underwent a rare heart and liver transplant in 1993.
Well, if your idea of exercise is a few push-ups before going to bed, you may want to consider pushing yourself a little bit harder. A new study by Harvard University suggests men who engage in vigorous exercise have a lower risk of dying. They point to jogging and other aerobic activities as a way to increase your lifespan. The findings counter current federal guidelines that recommend moderate exercise, like gardening.
That's no exercise at all, is it? Gardening?
Keep those tomatoes growing.
For your fingers, maybe.
We'll have more news after a break, so stay with us.
This is CBS News Up to the Minute. In his first news conference since the GOP took control of Congress, President Clinton last night outlined the role he wants to play in the second 100 days. Top on his agenda, a challenge to Republican lawmakers to send him a welfare reform plan he can sign by July 4th. Pessimism over trade talks between the U.S. and Japan are pushing down the dollar. Early in the Tokyo trading day, the greenback dipped briefly below 80 yen. That's the lowest mark since the modern exchange rate was set almost 50 years ago. Japan's central bank is buying up dollars in hopes of propping them up. In the Simpson case, CBS News has learned that Kato Kaelin is telling a different story than the one he told in court under oath. An author turned over conversations with Kaelin taped before the Simpson house guest took the witness stand. Those discussions counter Kaelin's testimony. Judge Ito recessed testimony in the trial until tomorrow. Today, he'll interview jurors about their possible racial tensions. Court ended yesterday with criminalist Dennis Fung's record 9th and final day on the stand and handshakes with the defense team and Simpson himself. And those are some of this morning's top stories from CBS News.
President Clinton held a news conference last night for the fourth time in his presidency, but for the first time since the Republicans took control of Congress. CBS News correspondent Regina Blakely has more on the president's address to the nation and on his agenda.
President Clinton used his first primetime news conference in 8 months to say he is relevant in the political process.
The Constitution gives me relevance. The power of our ideas gives me relevance.
The president also challenged Republicans on what is certain to be one of the issues of the '96 campaign, welfare reform.
I want to challenge Congress to pass a bipartisan welfare reform bill and put it on my desk by July the 4th so that we can celebrate Independence Day by giving Americans on welfare the chance, the opportunity, the responsibility to move.
Saying some of the legislation passed during the first 100 days of Congress was good, some needed work, and some should be rejected. The president promised to fight to put his 100,000 cops on the street, and he said he'd target any tax cuts to the middle class, adding current proposals for a flat tax hurt that middle class. President Clinton fielded questions on affirmative action and said he would fight for the nomination of Henry Foster for Surgeon General.
Dr. Foster is a good man with a good record. He should not be caught up in any kind of politics, presidential or otherwise.
On the foreign policy front, the president was asked about U.S.-Russian relations and the Middle East peace process, and whether he felt vindicated by former Defense Secretary Robert McNamara's admission that the Vietnam War was wrong.
I believed our policy was incorrect. I think the book supports that conclusion. But I do not believe that the book should be used as yet another opportunity to divide the United States over that.
And when asked to fill in the blank, I should be re-elected president because...
I have done what I said I would do, because we have got good results, and because the policies that I now advocate, most importantly, will address the outstanding problems of the country.
No news was expected and none was actually delivered. But with the '96 elections closer than you think, President Clinton knows he has to dish it out, just like the Republicans. Regina Blakely, CBS News at the White House.
On taxes, on welfare, and on the deficit, the president tried to bring new attention to his agenda last night. CBS News consultant Joe Klein joins us for a look at the president's address. And Joe, let's talk about the timing, first of all, and how did he do?
Well, the reason why he had it last night is because Congress is out of town, and he can finally get a clear channel in Washington.
With at least one of the networks, two
right.
He didn't carry it.
Right. Well, and also in the newspapers tomorrow and on the news tonight, with Newt Gingrich down in Georgia writing his book, it's a lot easier for the president to get his message out. Unfortunately, there wasn't all that much message there. It was a kind of grab bag of things. The message, if there was one, was I'm not as crazy as those guys up on the Hill. And if he is really unlucky, the president made a statement last night that may go down in history. He said the presidency is still relevant here. That may go down with Nixon's "I am not a crook" as a definition of what this president's trouble is right now. Relevance.
Yeah, because this whole press conference was billed as one about welfare reform. Of course, that was part of it, but it really struck me that it was more about reinventing the presidency and reinventing the Clinton administration. Is this administration in trouble?
You know, hi, I'm still here. I have ideas. I have things I want to do. I also wonder about the tactical wisdom of this welfare reform gambit. He's thrown down the gauntlet to the Republican Congress to come up with a welfare reform bill that looks a lot like the one that he didn't press too hard for the last couple of years. And the difference between his welfare reform and the Republican welfare reform tells you a lot about where politics is in this country now. He wants to change welfare as we know it. He wants to put women on welfare to work, but he wants to create government jobs for them to do when they're working, which is going to cost money. The jobs, the daycare, the medical care, all the rest of it is going to cost more than we're paying for welfare now. The Republicans are taking a very tough and maybe even heartless line. They're saying, we want to send them a message. We don't want them to be on welfare, period. We're going to cut off women under the age of 18 who have children out of wedlock. And we're going to send this back to the states. Welfare will no longer be an entitlement. Given the mood of the country, if I'm Bill Clinton, I can't be too sure that the Congress isn't going to send me a bill that I don't like very much.
Right. Okay. The president last night pledged that he would work with the new GOP Congress, also imposing this deadline of July 4th. We'll see how that goes. But you also feel strongly about his comments regarding affirmative action.
Well, I think that he ducked the question or refused to answer the question wisely tonight. The biggest event of Bill Clinton's presidency from here on out, from here until the election, is going to be where he comes out on affirmative action. And he's studying that. It's a terrible situation he's in. He may do just enough to alienate Jesse Jackson, but not enough to please the rest of the country. Polls show that Americans are very much opposed to racial preference programs. The president is kind of edging up to that, and he's going to have to figure out a way to do it without offending the base constituencies of the Democratic Party. That is going to be a difficult trick.
Yeah, let's wrap this up real quickly. What kind of shape is the Clinton administration in?
He needs a vacation. He's in a lot of hurt right now. Ultimately, if he has to hope that the Republicans go too far, that they make fools of themselves, fools on the Hill. But you can't guarantee that. They seem pretty well in control of it now. We have to look and see what the Senate does with the contract passed by the House.
All right. The last time we saw this scenario was what, in the 40s? 47, 48?
48, a Democratic president named Harry Truman with a Republican Congress. The Republican Congress acted really stupid. Bill Clinton can't be guaranteed that that's going to happen twice.
Joe Klein, thanks for being with us this morning. We appreciate the analysis. Good to see you. In other news, CBS News has learned that key prosecution witness Kato Kaelin is telling a different story than the one he told in court under oath. It's a potentially more damaging story for Simpson, and CBS News correspondent Anthony Mason has the details on that.
Did Kato Kaelin tell the truth about O.J. Simpson on the witness stand? An author who spent 5 months interviewing and writing a book with Kaelin is now casting doubts on the testimony of the star witness. Mark Elliott and his attorney Leonard Marks, who've turned over 15 hours of tapes to the prosecution, told CBS News in an interview about the inconsistencies and contradictions in the testimony of Kato Kaelin.
If you listen to the tapes, and then you listen to his testimony, you hear two completely different versions of events.
He testified that in the entire time that he knew O.J. Simpson and Nicole, that they had a good relationship. Over and over again in the tapes, he talks about rage, fury, fighting.
Did he ever show any anger or upset, or being upset at the fact that she was dating other men?
No. He told me in detail about the 911 incident, the night that O.J. came and ripped off the French doors of Nicole's part of the house.
He was yelling. The police came.
Mm-hmm. Would you say he was very angry?
Angry enough for the police to come, yes.
Nicole was terrified, as you know, but Kato told me that he had never seen anybody as enraged as O.J. Simpson that night.
And the tapes allegedly reveal that the night of the murders, Kato told O.J. Simpson he had heard thumps on his wall.
Kato Kaelin told O.J. Simpson, after hearing the thumps, that there was a prowler present, that O.J. Simpson did not go outside to look for the prowler, even though his daughter was living in the guest house.
And the thing that I questioned was, why didn't anybody call the police? And there really was no answer for that question.
And finally, Elliott says Kato Kaelin confessed that earlier Nicole Simpson confided in him.
One night he told me, she told him that she knew O.J. was going to kill her.
CBS News contacted Kalen's business manager, Michael Plotkin, who had no comment. The next question is, what is the prosecution going to do with the 15 hours of tapes and this new information? Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
A subway scare in Japan today. Some 36 people were taken to hospitals after complaining of stinging eyes and bad odors in train and subway stations in Yokohama. CBS News correspondent James Hattori joins us from our Tokyo bureau with the very latest. James, what can you tell us?
Well, Nanette, at least 38 people now have been taken to the hospital complaining of stinging eyes, a bad odor in those train stations. They've suffered dizziness and nausea. Apparently, nothing more serious than that at this point. No one has apparently lost consciousness. Obviously, no deaths have been reported. One hospital is saying that they have tested for sarin, and it is not apparently sarin. Some of the victims who were overcome by the fumes did report that it might have a sulfurous or possibly a phosphorus-like smell. But obviously, the questions, this having just happened a couple of hours ago, the questions are still very much unanswered.
But the symptoms, from what you're telling us of the victims, much different from what we saw last month with that nerve gas attack.
Yes, apparently not as serious in nature. During the sarin attack, the people were literally going into comas on the platform, losing consciousness, in some cases foaming at the mouth, severe headaches, severe symptoms that appear to be different in this case.
Also, James, before we let you go, tell us about Yokohama, where exactly that is and what the population is there.
Yokohama is considered Tokyo's port city, so it's really adjacent. It's maybe a 20, 30, 40-minute train ride, depending on on the traffic and which way you go. 1.5 million people use that subway station a day, so this is a very busy station. Actually, 3 stations were involved, which would seem to indicate that this is not an isolated incident or a terribly remote coincidence. So police are investigating. A lot of confusion on the scene. There's a chemical investigation course, a team that is from the Army on the scene now. Hope to have more answers later.
Okay, James Hattori reporting to us this morning from Tokyo. Thank you.
We'll be back with more news in a moment.
This is CBS News Up to the Minute.
He was no ordinary Joe, and yesterday the city by the bay said farewell to one of the greatest talents to ever walk on a football field, Joe Montana. The San Francisco 49ers quarterback, who engineered 4 Super Bowls, is now putting the pigskin down for good. And John Popovich has the story.
There was a celebration in San Francisco, a celebration for an ordinary Joe who just happened to do extraordinary things when he got on the football field. Joe Montana had a special talent to produce miracles. Even at college in Notre Dame in 1979, he led the Fighting Irish from 22 points down to beat Houston in the Cotton Bowl. 2 seasons later, he started to make his mark in the NFL. This pass by Montana and this catch by Dwight Clark against the Cowboys got the 49ers into their first Super Bowl ever, which they won over the Bengals. Montana's 49ers produced 4 Super Bowl championships. He and Jerry Rice formed the most deadly passing combination in the NFL. He engineered fourth-quarter comebacks 26 times, including this one against the Bengals in Super Bowl 23. His pass to John Taylor climaxed the most exciting Super Bowl yet. 2 years ago, this quarterbacking legend was traded to Kansas City. And last fall, he showed some of his former magic when he led the Chiefs to a heart-stopping comeback win over the Broncos at Mile High Stadium. Today, Joe Montana said farewell to football.
It's been like living a dream for me. I remember growing up, it all started with throwing footballs through a tire on a swing with my father. It went to those dreams of playing in the Super Bowls and in your backyard and throwing touchdown passes and making diving catches in the backyard. And the fortunate thing for me is that all that became a reality at some point or another.
The kid from Monongahela became the most famous resident of San Francisco. In 5 years, he'll have a permanent home in Canton, Ohio. John Popovich for CBS News.
We talk a lot these days about soaring medical bills, the lack of health insurance, and the cost of caring for the aged and critically ill. But we're talking about it again, only with a twist. Every year, Americans shell out more than $10 billion on their pets' health care. Chances are, if the treatment's available for you, it's probably available for your pet as well. CBS News Money editor John Stair has more on pet care for those who can pay.
First point that I'm going to start with is a point called bow way, and I use about a 3.5-inch needle.
The thought of a needle that long would make most people cringe, but Dr. Meredith Snader's patients don't often complain. She's a veterinarian who uses an old technique to treat a new four-legged clientele.
Acupuncture came to this country in the mid-70s, and I'd say probably since the early 80s, it's just increased tremendously, both in small and in large animals.
Mark Sommer is not a veterinarian, but a chiropractor, and his fastest-growing clientele walks in on a leash.
We do treat small animals, dogs, and cats most commonly, although ferrets can be treated, hamsters, guinea pigs, rabbits can be treated.
And it's not just equine acupuncture and canine chiropractic. Animal medicine has gone high-tech.
This is his left ventricle down here.
Nothing but the best is now available when man's best friend gets sick.
This piece of equipment is identical to what you would find in human hospitals.
Advances in caring for animals are coming about as fast as those for treating humans. Pet owners who once had no choice but to put down their animals have a whole new set of options. And with that comes a dilemma: balancing family finances against your pet's life. 3-year-old Hannah was diagnosed with a life-threatening blood disorder at the University of Pennsylvania Veterinary Hospital. After a week and a half and $2,000 in medical bills, doctors had no cure or prognosis for her health.
Our pets are our children, really, so we just about do the same for our pets as most people would do, for their children.
The problem is, doing whatever it takes can cost more than many pet owners are able or willing to pay.
A lot of people don't think, oh my God, how can an operation for a dog cost, $3,000? That's outrageous, maybe for a human being.
We do take all the credit cards. We'll let them pay over a period of time, but eventually they do have to pay.
Most pet medical bills are paid out of pocket. Less than 2% of cats and dogs are covered by insurance. So several companies are stepping into that void. Still, no one expects anything close to universal health care for pets, leaving uninsured pet owners caught between high-tech care and the high cost that goes along with it. John Stair, CBS News, New York.
And that's our news for this half hour.
This is CBS News Up to the Minute.
This is CBS.
It's too weak on work and too tough on children.
Now on CBS News Up to the Minute, President Clinton urges Congress to cooperate on welfare reform.
Plus, words of thanks from the defense just before police criminalist Dennis Fung gets sprung.
Good morning from CBS News in New York. This is Up to the Minute. I'm Ed Crane.
And I'm Nanette Hansen. Good morning, and thanks for being with us. Here's what's happening. President Clinton is challenging Congress to work with him on coming up with an acceptable welfare bill. At a primetime news conference last night, Mr. Clinton said he wants to sign a bill that would help people gain independence from welfare. CBS newsman Mark Knoller reports.
With Republicans having dominated the first 100 days of the new Congress, the president was out to assert the role he wants to play in the second 100 days.
I want to challenge Congress to pass a bipartisan welfare reform bill and put it on my desk by July the 4th so that we can celebrate Independence Day by giving Americans on welfare the chance, the opportunity, the responsibility to move to independence.
But the president said a bill will only be acceptable if the Senate makes significant changes in the House-passed welfare reform legislation by adding welfare-to-work job training and restoring benefits to underage welfare mothers.
And it's wrong to cut children off just because their mothers are minor. After all, a child is a child, a baby is a baby. Whether they're white or black or brown, whether they're born in or out of wedlock, every child deserves a chance to make a good life.
On another bone of contention with Congress, Mr. Clinton dug in his heels behind his nominee for Surgeon General, Dr. Henry Foster.
Yes, I'm going to the mat for the nomination.
with Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole saying he would oppose the nomination and urging the White House to withdraw it. Mr. Clinton charged that presidential politics were at play against Foster.
But you know, sometimes the American system works the way it's supposed to, and sometimes the right thing has been done. I will say again, he is a distinguished physician, he is a good man, he has a good record, he should be confirmed.
Asked about growing support for a flat-rate income tax system, Mr. Clinton said he has new understanding for those who advocate pulling the plug on the complicated tax code in effect now.
Well, I'll tell you what, after I just went over my tax returns last week, that has more appeal than it did a week ago. And I think a lot of Americans feel that way.
The news conference proved not to be the forum the president was hoping for, and the White House admitted it was disappointed that 2 of the big 3 television networks did not provide live coverage of the event. Nevertheless, Mr. Clinton brushed it aside and asserted that he is relevant by virtue of his ideas and his record, even in the era of House Speaker Newt Gingrich. Mark Knoller, CBS News at the White House.
Authorities in Japan are trying to figure out just what caused dozens of people to get sick at 3 train stations in the port city of Yokohama this morning. At least 38 people were taken to hospitals after complaining of stinging eyes, dizziness, and nausea. A Japanese television report says a faulty air conditioner on a train passing through the stations may have been responsible. Officials say there's no immediate indication that this morning's incident is linked to last month's nerve gas attack on Tokyo's subway system. A dozen people were killed and more than 5,000 injured in that attack. Another global low for the dollar this morning as it briefly dipped below 80 yen today on the Tokyo Foreign Currency Exchange. During today's trading, Japan's central bank bought up dollars to end the currency's tailspin, but traders say it remains weak. The dollar drop is being blamed on pessimism over the lack of progress in trade talks between the U.S. and Japan.
The Clinton administration is expressing disappointment that Iraq has broken a promise to allow weekly visits to 2 Americans being held in a Baghdad prison. A Polish diplomat yesterday was turned away for no reason when he showed up outside the prison carrying food, soft drinks, and reading material. William Barloon and David Delaberti are serving 8-year sentences in prison for crossing into Iraq from Kuwait. Israel has closed the West Bank and Gaza Strip in an effort to crack down on terrorism. Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin says the area will stay sealed until the Palestinian self-rule government shows it can control militant groups that attack Israel.
I look at it as measures that have to prevent, to reduce considerably the potentialities that people from Gaza will carry out any kind of terror attacks, especially by high explosives and no doubt suicidal terror mission.
Rabin made the announcement after inspecting Israeli checkpoints and the security fence around Gaza. The closure means Palestinian workers won't be allowed to travel to their jobs in Israel. Jurors in the O.J. Simpson trial won't be in the courtroom today. Instead, they'll be in Judge Lance Ito's chambers. He'll question them one by one about claims of racial strife and other alleged problems. Yesterday, police criminalist Dennis Fung ended his testimony after more than a week and a half of blistering attacks on his credibility by the defense. CBS News correspondent Manuel Gallegos reports from Los Angeles.
Criminalist Dennis Fung, his 9th day on the stand, a record for a witness in the Simpson case. And at times it seemed like attorneys were stretching to get in the last word before the jury. Judge Ito grew impatient.
Haven't we gone over this already?
Well, he did it on redirect. I'm doing it fast.
Doesn't mean we have to do it again.
Defense attorney Barry Scheck tried to hold on to the defense theory that police are framing O.J. Simpson and that Fung was somehow involved in a cover-up.
Do you have a habit, sir, of when you testify, of going along with whatever suggestions the prosecution makes to you?
Sustained.
This time, prosecutor Hank Goldberg offered nothing new except to counter Scheck's questions. At one point, Goldberg actually mimicked Scheck's aggressive style.
And Mr. Scheck said, "Where is it, Mr. Fung?"
Defense attorney Scheck didn't appear to be amused.
How do you feel
Was there ever a moment where you just felt like...
Outside the courthouse, criminalist Fung was bombarded with more questions from reporters, although this time he was under no obligation to answer.
Green light!
And in another development, Simpson house guest Kato Kalin may have some explaining to do to prosecutors. On the witness stand, Kalin testified he had no plans to write a book. But author Mark Elliott says Cato has done a series of interviews with him for a book, and that Cato may have perjured himself on the witness stand.
If you listen to the tapes and then you listen to his testimony, you hear two completely different versions of events.
He testified that in the entire time that he knew O.J. Simpson and Nicole, that they had a good relationship. Over and over again in the tapes, he talks about rage, fury, fighting.
Court is not in session Wednesday to give Judge Ito and attorneys time to interview the jurors to see what problems, if any, they may be having. Manuel Gallegos, CBS News, Los Angeles.
And still ahead, cleaning out clogged arteries, a comparison study that could save your life.
Plus, this morning's prescription for women, putting the trust you put in your doctor in the medical lab.
Stay with us. This is CBS News Up to the Minute. For millions of Americans who've spent years avoiding exercise, nature's wake-up call can be clogged arteries and a heart attack. It could take a complex medical procedure to clear those clogged arteries. But is a new method for doing it the best method? CBS News health correspondent Dr. Bob Arnott has the answer, and it could be a lifesaver.
When Roger Herbst had a heart attack, two different non-surgical procedures were available to save his life.
I was very close to death, according to the doctors. They came in and gave me the last rites in the hospital.
Herbst's doctors chose angioplasty. A balloon was pushed into the blocked artery, then inflated, flattening the plaque against the artery wall. With the artery widened, the blood flow was increased.
It opened up the arteries. I felt like a 20-year-old kid again, wanting to do everything I did when I was younger.
Doctors could have chosen to do another procedure called atherectomy, inserting a device that peels fatty plaque off the vessel wall. But a new study from the prestigious Cleveland Clinic shows that death rates following atherectomy are almost 4 times higher than angioplasty. And the chance of a heart attack immediately following atherectomy is 2 to 3 times higher. Doctors offer one possible reason for the results.
Bleeding or other problems related to the insertion of the equipment into the patient was more common in the atherectomy group.
Atherectomy often needs to be repeated, each time carrying that inherent risk of death, and many patients still end up needing bypass surgery.
The one-year mortality rate with atherectomy is comparable to bypass surgery. And in fact, in this group of patients, bypass surgery might have been safer even than atherectomy.
So where does all of this leave patients? One important lesson may be that what seems like a simple non-surgical procedure may not always carry the lowest risk. Bypass surgery, with its longer recovery, and conservative medical therapy should be carefully considered as well. Dr. Bob Arnott, CBS News, New York.
Last week, homicide charges were filed against a Wisconsin medical lab after 2 women died of cervical cancer. The laboratory stands accused of misreading their pap smear tests repeatedly, resulting in their deaths. The tragedy again raises the issue of the trustworthiness of pap smear tests. Every year, 50 million women rely on the pap smears as routine screening for cervical cancer. It's not the first time the pap smear reliability question has been raised. Where do things stand now? Was the Wisconsin tragedy an isolated case? And what can we do to protect ourselves? Our frequent contributor, Dr. Emily Sine, has been looking into these questions, and she joins us once again this morning with some answers.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Nanette. When most women go to a doctor, they may want to know about the doctor's qualifications and experience, but few inquire about the quality of the lab the doctor relies on. Until the late 80s, labs that screened pap smears came under almost no regulatory scrutiny. But federal law now requires careful review of all pap smear labs. Regulators are just now finishing their evaluation of the 4,000 pap smear labs, and some of the worst labs have been put out of business. Pap accuracy is this morning's prescription for women.
In 1987, the Wall Street Journal took a close look at the poorly regulated medical lab industry, highlighting cases where pap smears were misread and cervical cancer went undetected. In response, public attention focused on the so-called pap mills, large labs that process too many pap smears and in some cases failed to detect cancer. Congressional hearings followed and resulted in the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendment of 1988, also known as the CLIA law. Since 1989, 8 labs that were responsible for more than 500,000 pap smears a year have been shut down. In addition, routine inspections cited another 38 labs with serious problems. Those labs must now correct the problems or face possible shutdown. All pap labs must now be surveyed every 2 years. The CLIA law also struck at the heart of one of the biggest problems with the labs: profits. The more pap smears technicians read, the more money they earned. Incentive for technicians to read many pap smears a day, too many to always accurately find cancer when it existed. Now the law says a technician can read no more than 100 slides in a 24-hour period or 12,000 slides a year. To put this in perspective, the technician involved in the Wisconsin case reportedly read nearly 50,000 slides in 1989.
Almost all the experts that I spoke with say that pap testing is better regulated now than just a few years ago. But it isn't an exact science. Mistakes can still be made. Nanette, one of the important things to know is that none of the experts are saying that women should stop getting them or that they're not effective. And women should still be getting the pap smear. It's the most effective screening tool for cervical cancer. So women shouldn't be scared out of getting it because of what happened in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and you can see why they would be frightened. Terrible, terrible mistakes apparently made there. What's happened to that lab?
Well, that lab has been shut down actually since 1991. Complaints were made against that lab, I think in 1990, and the regulators went in and tried to get them to make changes, and they would not. So they shut that lab down, and other labs like it, which had made similar mistakes.
All right, what should I do? What should you do? What should women out there watching do to try to at least safeguard as best they can about pap smear testing?
Right.
Any precautions?
Yes, there's 3 things you can do. The first thing you should do is talk to your doctor. Find out from the doctor if the doctor knows the lab where the pap smear will be looked at, if he's comfortable with the lab, if he or she knows the people personally, how accurate are they? One of the things that's happened as managed care and HMOs have come into being more and more popular is large labs that read these pap smears get contracts with these HMOs. So pap smears may be going to a state where the doctor doesn't even know the people there. So that's one of the things that women should start out with. How comfortable is their own doctor with the lab? Secondly, their State Department of Health in any state in this country will have information on every lab that has actions against it, complaints against it, and you can find out specifically from State Departments of Health about the lab where your pap smear is going. You can also find out from the Healthcare Financing Administration or HCFA regional offices will also have information. In fact, they keep a list of all labs, any lab, not only pap smear labs, that have had actions against it under the new law. Finally, and this is important for women who want to get really specific information, they can call this number, and the number is 1-800-LAB-5678. That's the College of American Pathologists. They are one of the certifying organizations, and if you call this number and you tell them the name and address of the lab where your pap smear goes to, they will tell you whether or not that lab is accredited. In addition, they will send you a brochure telling you the basics of what pap smears are if you want to get more information on that. So those are the 3 main things women need to do.
Okay, very important in that last number. Additionally helpful.
Yes.
Dr. Sine, thank you so much, and we want to wish you good luck because you're getting married this weekend.
Thank you, Nanette. Thank you very much.
Congratulations to you and your fiancé, soon-to-be husband.
Thanks.
You've been watching CBS News Up to the Minute. We'll be back after a short break.
Several inches of rain fell on southeastern South Dakota, doing plenty of damage. A flash flood warning was issued by the Weather Service for much of the area. The region has already gotten more than 2 inches of rain, and guess what? More is expected. Forecasters say the heavy rainfall will add to flooding problems around local rivers and streams. Now it's time to take a look at your weather.
That's right. Let's take a look at it. A storm moving through the southwest will spread rain to the plains and snow to the Rockies. Showers and thunderstorms will rumble across Texas and into the lower Mississippi Valley. Highs in the west will range from the 30s and 40s in the Rockies to the 60s and 70s over California and Arizona. But Ed, guess how warm it's going to get in the southeast?
hot, hot, hot.
That's right. Temperatures in the 80s and 90s.
Say it ain't so, Joe. Sports fans are echoing that old line. They're talking this time about Joe Montana, the all-time All-American football great. In San Francisco, CBS News correspondent John Blackstone has the last hurrahs for a legend.
Greatest football player of our time, most probably of all time, Joe Montana.
In a crowded downtown plaza, Joe said it is so. At 38, his football career is over.
I really and truly never thought that this day would ever come where I would, saying that word, retirement.
Oh, that's the only man I died for.
It's been like living a dream.
Just think we could all just be him for one day. Just take the ball and be cool.
Montana's trademark was cool excellence under pressure. When winning seemed impossible, when the clock was running out, that's when Montana came through.
The throw is to Rice. Montana looking. Touchdown, John Taylor.
Another touchdown.
In the end zone. Caught
By 1990, after 4 Super Bowl victories, injuries caught up with Montana. He spent 2 seasons off the field. Then the 49ers traded him to Kansas City.
When he left 2 years ago, it was mostly unpleasant on all sides. This is more an acknowledgement of his best years.
Joe Montana doesn't need a gold watch. This retirement celebration isn't just about memories, it's also about marketing, all organized by Montana's business agent to help launch him on his next lucrative career. Boston Market, one of Montana's many sponsors, fed the press today. Joe has something to take the place of football, though many fans say nothing will ever take the place of Joe. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
The Phoenix Suns remained a half game ahead of Seattle in the race for the NBA's Pacific Division crown. Charles Barkley led the Suns with 28 points against Sacramento, which lost its 3rd in a row. Former King Wayman Tisdale added 18 for the Suns, who kept Sacramento 1 game behind Denver in the race for the final Western Conference playoff berth with a 111-101 win. Seattle ran away and hid from the Lakers at the Forum. Gary Payton had 28, and the Sonics led by as many as 37 points on the way to a 113-97 victory.
Welcome back to CBS News Up to the Minute. This is Wednesday, April 19th, and it's an important date in American history. It was on this date in 1775 that the American Revolution began.
Charge. And topping the news on April 19th, 1989 was what appeared to be a deadly accident on the USS Iowa. CBS News correspondent Ron Allen had this report.
Rapid continuous fire, commence fire. Rapid fire.
The battleship USS Iowa was some 300 miles northeast of Puerto Rico when a fiery explosion in the No. 2 gun turret rocked the ship, killing and wounding sailors in the turret and in the decks below. As many as 100 sailors were manning the big guns. The battleship was taking part in what Navy officials say was a routine exercise, along with nearly 30 other ships. The explosion occurred while crewmen were firing the guns in a normal test. The blaze was put out before it reached the main ammunition magazines. An explosion there could have destroyed the whole ship. The Iowa was able to steam under its own power to a rendezvous with the carrier Coral Sea, 130 miles away, which had medical personnel aboard to offer assistance. Helicopters transported some of the injured. President Bush expressed his concern about the loss of life during a meeting with congressional leaders.
That it is a great tragedy and a matter of terrible sadness.
The Iowa had recently returned to its home port in Norfolk, Virginia before moving out for exercises in the western Atlantic. The ship had spent more than a year on duty escorting tankers through the Persian Gulf.
Of the explosion, a total of 47 sailors lost their lives in the blast. The Navy later blamed one of those who died, gunner's mate Clayton Hartwig, saying he was suicidal. But the chief of naval operations, Admiral Frank Kelso, later admitted that there was no proof of sabotage. A second investigation also failed to find an accidental cause for the explosion.
In 1950, one headline was considerably more positive. St. John's Episcopal Hospital in New York reported the first successful use of cardiac massage to treat heart attack victims on this date 45 years ago. But that's the news for this half hour. Thanks for joining us.
This is CBS News Up to the Minute.
The Army said he was killed by the enemy during the Gulf War, but that's not what his buddy said.
He said, what the Army is telling you is a lie. He was killed by an American unit.
And when some of the soldiers involved got medals, his parents got mad.
That's like spitting on Lance's grave.
A family's fight for justice tonight on the CBS Evening News. They are born too soon and too small. Now their families face the fight of their lives. Stories of miracle babies on 48 Hours, Thursday. This is CBS.
Next on CBS News Up to the Minute, Dennis Fung finally takes a walk, and new twists in Cato's story about a book deal.
And the president orders up a July 4th bang on welfare reform. Good morning from CBS News in New York. This is Up to the Minute. I'm Ed Crane.
And I'm Nanette Hansen. Thanks for being with us. Here's what's making news. Cato Kalin's story is twisting in the wind, at least when it comes to his testimony about a book deal. CBS News has learned the story could be quite different from the one Cato told on the stand and under oath in the O.J. Simpson trial. Harvey Levin reports from Los Angeles.
You consider yourself the defendant's friend, don't you, Mr. Kalin?
Yes. Cato Kalin testified from his vantage point. O.J. and Nicole Simpson shared many good times. But author Mark Elliott and Elliott's attorney Leonard Mark say Kalin told them a different story.
Over and over again in the tapes, he talks about rage, fury, fighting.
He told me, she told him that she knew O.J. was going to kill her.
I haven't heard the tapes, Harvey. I'm very surprised at that because his testimony was contrary to that. So under oath, that's not what he said.
You're free to go. Thank you, sir. Dennis Fung was free at last, but not before intense grilling by Barry Scheck. Scheck argued Fung's hazy memory about the socks found in O.J. Simpson's bedroom is telling, given the belated discovery of what the prosecution says is Nicole Brown Simpson's blood on the socks.
You were concerned, were you not, that they might have been socks worn by the assailant? That was the prosecution's theory.
That was a possibility. The defense has suggested it was preposterous to believe such important evidence would not be immediately evaluated for blood. Prosecutor Hank Goldberg used mockery to suggest Fung had problems on cross-examination because of Scheck's shrill style.
Do you remember the question when you were shown the picture of the rear gate and Mr. Scheck said, "Where is it, Mr. Fung?"
I remember that.
Your Honor. I was just curious. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fung.
When Fung stepped down, he shocked everyone by shaking hands with the defense team and O.J. Simpson. Fung then bolted out of the courthouse.
What's your feeling about Barry Scheck?
No comment. Howard Stern?
Yes.
Baba Booey.
You like
Peter. Green light! And the trial has been derailed yet again. The judge will spend the day interviewing jurors one by one, trying to get to the bottom of the allegations made by dismissed juror Jeanette Harris. Also today, the defense is expected to file legal papers arguing Judge Ito has not been respectful enough of the defense before the jury. In Los Angeles, Harvey Levin for CBS News.
It's a sickening and frightening sense of deja vu in Japan this morning. Dozens of people are hospitalized after complaining of stinging eyes and bad odors in subway stations in Yokohama. A military poison gas warfare unit has been sent to the area. Japan has been on edge since a poison gas attack on Tokyo subways last month, which killed 12 people and sickened at least 5,000. Yokohama is a crowded commercial city next to Tokyo, and police say they have not yet determined a connection between this incident and the attack on the Tokyo subway. Things are looking pretty gloomy for the U.S. dollar in Japan as well. The greenback took another big dive, dipping below 80 yen. At one point this morning, the dollar was trading at 79.75 yen, below the previous low, which was set just 10 days ago. Today's plunge marks the lowest dollar-yen rate since the modern exchange rate system was set up in the late 1940s. Traders say Japan's central bank has been buying dollars steadily to try to keep it from falling further.
President Clinton took to the airwaves last night for the fourth primetime news conference of his presidency. In the wake of 100-plus days of Republican dominance, it was a chance for the president to assert his role and push his own agenda. And he challenged GOP leaders to work with him on a key issue.
I want to challenge Congress to pass a bipartisan welfare reform bill and put it on my desk by July the 4th. So that we can celebrate Independence Day by giving Americans on welfare the chance, the opportunity, the responsibility to move to independence.
The president repeated his claim that the current reform bill passed by the House is too weak on work and too tough on children.
A cost-cutting proposal by a NASA panel could mean big changes for the Johnson Space Center in Houston. The space agency unveiled a reorganization plan yesterday. Some spacecraft engineering duties may be transferred from Houston to Alabama or Florida. The move could cost Houston thousands of jobs.
What they're going to have to do is build new buildings, they're going to have to restructure, and this will gut, the current plan that's out there right now will gut NASA. 7,000 jobs will gut NASA and will destroy the economy down there.
Yet officials at the Johnson Space Center say they are taking the proposal seriously and are not taking the reorganization sitting down.
Cheyenne Brando, the troubled daughter of actor Marlon Brando, was laid to rest in Tahiti yesterday. The 25-year-old hanged herself Sunday. Only close relatives were permitted to attend the funeral, but her father, Marlon Brando, was not among them. Brando's agent said the actor would have no comment on his daughter's death and denied reports Brando had been hospitalized. Family associates said Cheyenne had been distraught since the killing of her boyfriend, Dag Drelay, in 1990 by her half-brother, Christian.
An unusual convergence of church and state is playing out in western Pennsylvania. That's where two women have been banned from church for praying too loudly. CBS News correspondent Randall Pinkston reports.
Oh my Jesus, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell.
Joan Sutwa and Cynthia Belconi are delivering the Word of God, but their version of God's message is too raucous for their fellow worshipers. They've been banned from two western Pennsylvania churches for praying too loudly, and the Diocese of Greensburg has gone to court, the church going to the state for help.
You've been summoned by the Bishop of the Diocese of Greensburg to a hearing on Monday, April 17th at 3 p.m. in his office.
The bishop has tried reasoning with the two women.
It was fruitless. I got nowhere. They told me the heavens were telling them this.
But when they tried to attend Good Friday services at the cathedral in Greensburg, this was the message they received.
I ask you to please leave. You are trespassing on the premises, and you are trespassing against the order of the court. Please leave.
They ignored the priest, but couldn't ignore the law.
And we have to enforce that court order by Judge Scheer, and we have to remove it from the presence. So would you please kindly come with us?
There were no handcuffs, just an invitation to see the judge and explain why they violated his order.
I suggested to them that if they do appear in court, that they should have an attorney or a defender, a public defender,
they have told me that Jesus will defend them.
Joan Satwa and Cynthia Belconi agreed to obey the judge's order and tone down the volume of their prayers. They already proved they could pray quietly during Easter services at a church 20 miles away. Now their fellow worshipers in Greensburg wait to see if they heed the word of the law as they do the word of the Lord. Randall Pinkston, CBS News, New York.
Still to come, just what kind of exercise may actually help you live longer.
And the gift of life from organ donors, why the need is getting more attention. Stay with us. This is CBS News Up to the Minute.